have to be a Brookfield pipeline?
Of economic slowdown in Canada. He should stand in his place right now and apologize for those comments. Take those members to task and do something for...
If the Conservatives want the truth, we'll tell them the truth.
Yesterday from the Prime Minister really freaked these Conservatives out because they saw the ambition in that speech. And not only did they see it in that speech today, as the Prime Minister stood with the Premier investing in new nuclear to ensure the jobs of today and the future, they know that the youth...
The only thing that's revolting are those answers.
Speaker, we will take no lessons from these Conservatives. Trust me on that, Mr. Speaker.
It's bad that that minister didn't write the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, because it wouldn't have bored and depressed to tears all of those poor students stuck in that room. There he spoke about how they would have to sacrifice more and that it would take time to reverse all of the misery that has built up over the last 10 years. Mr. Speaker, young people want to have homes. They want to have jobs. They want to have hope. They want a budget that is affordable so they can have a life that is affordable. Will the Prime Minister introduce that budget so that Canadians can restore the promise of their country?
And we decide what comes next.
Canada know that this government has their back. It will continue. Henceforth, there's going to be a powerful statement for the young people of Canada.
Driving inflation. The more Liberals spend, the more it costs Canadians at the grocery store. 25% of Canadians are using food banks because they can't afford to eat. So when will the Prime Minister finally get his inflationary deficits under control so Canadians can put food on the table?
Mr. Speaker, Conservative members pretend to care about food insecurity, but then they call feeding children garbage.
Mr. Speaker, what's garbage was that answer.
Did the Prime Minister see the ad before it went out?
Of course there are too many people living in poverty in Canada, but there are significant initiatives being put in place by this government.
Being serious means being honest and telling Canadians.
Canada's economy is in fact growing, Mr. Speaker.
I can't imagine what we have in store for Wednesday.
We are able to proceed. The Leader of the Opposition, now that he's standing right there, may want to stand up and say, what part of that process would he not respect, Mr. Speaker? Understudy, and we are building the country at unimaginable speed. We are creating opportunities for energy workers, for young people, for housing, for steel, lumber, aluminum, and autos in this country. That is what we are doing. What is shocking is that the Leader of the Opposition stands in his place and somehow pretends in his whole fake way that he's going to override and steamroll the rights of Canadians that have a right to have a say in these projects. We're going to give them a say. He won't.
Position.
While the Prime Minister hides under his desk, he puts up his House Leader to rant and rave and pump his fists in the air. So when he finally stand up for workers, stand up in this House and answer the question, a pipeline or a pipe dream?
The member for Calgary Midnapore suggested the Prime Minister was disloyal to Canada. Secondly, the member for Northern Rockies repeated MAGA claims that immigrants were the cause of economic slowdown in Canada. He should stand in his place right now and apologize for those comments. Take those members to task and do something for...
Phone, microphone. There we go. Hey, welcome everybody. Terribly sorry for the delay. I'll explain that right after I do the intro. Welcome to the NAP, the no answer period, where we cover the question period prefaced by the far left fluttery that has been besetting our land and the events that surround it. The NAP precedes the question period normally by 45 minutes, but not today, which I will explain in a second, and we'll cover the lower house until the government decides to stop showing up. We also keep score. Subscribe in the description below. And we are streaming on 3 platforms, Rumble, X, and CommieTube. If you don't have access to the description below, like you're watching it maybe on a Fire Stick on your TV or something, basically questions are asked by the opposition. Questions that are asked by the government to the government are FBQs, freebie questions, self-licking ice cream cone questions to make the government look good. Typically, those are always answers, so you will get an A for an answer. When you don't get an answer, you get an app. A no answer period, which means that basically you've obfuscated, you've walked around, you haven't really answered, or you've partially answered it but not completely answered it. And as well, you can actually answer the question and still throw some lies into your answer as well, so you can get ding some extra lies. And when it comes to lies, we track the lies, but we only track a maximum of 3 lies per MP when they speak. And I got to tell you, the majority of them, when they stand up and they start spewing lies like a rug that they are, it's not hard to reach 3 per. Some episodes have maxed out each Liberal MP when they stood up to speak. Uh, of 3 lies. Anyway, the reason why we're late, I have no idea why this keeps happening. Literally, 10 minutes before the show, sound quits on the laptop. Do a restart, no internet. Do a restart, get everything started. Now I'm back. But of course, all the prep that we did is going to take a little longer now. And look at that. I'm doing the old forever view. Should have been paying more attention to that. Oh, yes, look at the website. Okay, let's get straight to the show. And Pierre Polyev released a tweet today, a post on X, I should say. And this is no surprise because he had left a post yesterday. They wanted to have an emergency debate, and people on the far left side of the politics in Canada were going, "Oh, this is so cringe! It's so cringe!" Like, why is everything that people want to do that is representative of the people who put them in office in in our parliamentary democracy? Why is that cringe? Why is it when our representatives from whatever riding that they are in are trying to get the voices of their people heard in Parliament? Why is that cringe, folks? Why is that? Anyway, so here he is, his post. You snuck out the back door of the House mid-question period to dodge debate with me on pipelines. Then you dodged the emergency debate on softwood lumber. Your schedule is open for question period today. You're in Ottawa. Show up for work. Be accountable. Stop hiding. And what is he referring to? Well, we have a small supplementary vid from yesterday that we posted up shortly before the show, and you'll see a lot of questions being asked. But even though the PM is sitting in Parliament in the lower house for most of these initially, he just won't stand and answer. Of course, he'll give it to his other ministers. This is something I mentioned yesterday. It's something that I had also heard from other people. Of course, I'm going to keep repeating this because it's true. And because I've seen it with my own eyes over the years, over the decades that I've been paying attention to the lower house in Canada, from the time before it was even broadcast on TV for everyone to see. If we wanted to know what was going on, we had to read the Hansard. So I go to the library and pull out the Hansard. We had to look it up on microfiche. And then once it did start being, it was like rather interesting. So, and then of course, what they were used to doing in Parliament for years, because it was always on the radio. You could listen to it on the radio, but there was no visual. And it's kind of hard to go back and find audio archives back then because there was no digitalization, unless of course you went to the library, standalone building. But when their ministers or anyone on their side of the house would say something, instead of applauding, right, what would they do? They would thump the desks. There's You still see a few of them doing it now and then, they're thumping the desk, but for when you were listening on the radio, all you heard was like a thunder. And everybody's just like, and you got used to it. But then as soon as it came on TV, people were like, "What are they doing?" They're just like, like, just so it looked a little strange because when people give accolades to other people in public, it was usually through applause, or they would say something vocally, "Huzzah!" Right? Or applause, or putting their hands in the air or something, but not thumping a plank nearby. And it's certainly not something that most people were taught to do when we went through school, sitting at desks, and all the different types of desks we had in the past. Actually, I started school where desks you still had a flip up desk where you could put stuff inside. Nowadays, they're probably just a little slab for you to sit at. Maybe they're just all IT portals that they'll be plugging in their brains into. But anyways, getting back to what we're talking about in the lower house, typically, so since then, questions used to be asked, and questions would normally be answered, even under the time of Jean Chrétien, when he was serving as prime minister. He would often try to answer actual questions. But what we see now is performance, just pure performance. They have their standalone talking points that each minister has. They have the pre-prepared script, regardless of what the question is, right? They're going to tout their the benefits are coming out today, or we're going to give you a free bag lunch, or child benefits, or free dental, or blah, blah, blah. Something that obviously doesn't apply to everybody, but, everybody had to pay for. And they always have the same script. And then when that doesn't work, what do? They get angry, and then they yell. Mr. Speaker, let's watch.
My question is?
Wrong video. This one? Well, let's just watch this one while I get the right one.
My question is, when was the last time you communicated with the Prime Minister? And you're required to answer.
I'm happy to answer.
You obfuscated with your first response, sir, so I'm giving you the precision that you're required to answer the question, and it is directly when you last communicated with Mr. Carney.
Since he departed office, I have met with him only once.
And what was the nature of the meeting?
I contacted him to have a discussion about the rise in hate incidents, particularly antisemitism, across Canada.
And what was the date of the contact and the date of the meeting?
I contacted him a couple weeks before that, maybe more. The date of the meeting was Friday, October 3rd or 4th.
And did you meet in person or virtually?
I met in person with him. I took the afternoon off and I came to Ottawa on my own dime.
Okay. And did you meet with him here or in the Prime Minister's office on Wellington?
I believe it's the Prime Minister's office.
Okay. And is that in this building, or is that in, because he's got a couple. So is that in this building here, or is that the one down the street?
On the corner.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The question was for the Prime Minister. He's here in Ottawa today. He has the ability to stand up and state his position. He claimed that he was going to act with unimaginable speed. Here we are 8 months later, and he refuses to state whether he even supports The question was for the Prime Minister. He's here in Ottawa today. He has the ability to stand up and state his position. He claimed that he was going to act with unimaginable speed. Here we are 8 months later, and he refuses to state whether he even supports a new oil pipeline or whether he'd like to continue to pump that oil at discounts to the United States of America while Canadians pay the price. What does it take to get a pipeline approved by this Prime Minister? Does it have to be a Brookfield pipeline?
The honorable government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, natural resources projects, interprovincial resource projects, there are indeed a great deal of those. The federal government has a unique role and must ensure that our obligations to First Nations, our obligations to other provinces, to communities, to consulting are present and those conditions are met, and then we are able to proceed the leader of the opposition, now that he's standing right there, may want to stand up and say, what part of that process would he not respect, Mr. Speaker?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I don't respect the idea of standing in the way of Canadian energy workers and giving our oil to the Americans at a discount. What we would do is get the government out of the way and get the project built. The Prime Minister has the unique constitutional opportunity to do that. Section 9210 of the BNA Act makes it exclusively a federal decision. This Prime Minister is hiding under his desk rather than answering the question. 8 months after promising that he would take unprecedented action with unimaginable speed, he's done nothing. Why doesn't he get out of the way?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Nonsense. We have dozens of major projects in play and understudy, and we are building the country at unimaginable speed. We are creating opportunities for energy workers, for young people, for housing, for steel, lumber, aluminum, and autos in this country. That is what we are doing. What is shocking is that the leader of the opposition stands in his place and somehow pretends in his whole fake way that he's going to override and steamroll the rights of Canadians that have a right to have a say in these projects. We're going to give them a say. He won't.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
While the Prime Minister hides under his desk, he puts up his House Leader to rant and rave and pump his fists in the air. This Prime Minister said that we faced an existential crisis requiring that we act with unimaginable speed. And here we are 8 months later, and he doesn't even have the courage to tell Canadians whether he supports a pipeline that would allow us to go around the American monopoly of our energy and get our product to the world. So will he finally stand up for workers, stand up in this House, and answer the question, a pipeline or a pipe dream?
Mr. Speaker, speaking of ranting and raving, I asked the leader of the opposition yesterday. Two significant things were said by members of his caucus last week. Number one, the member for Calgary Midnapore suggested the Prime Minister was disloyal to Canada. Secondly, the member for Northern Rockies repeated mega claims that immigrants were the cause of economic slowdown in Canada. He should stand in his place right now and apologize for those comments. Take those members to task and do something for
I can't imagine what we have in store for Wednesday. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's not us the question, the loyalty of the Prime Minister. He's the one that is blocking a pipeline that would allow Canada to become energy independent, to reach markets outside of Canada, while he and his company invest in pipelines in the Middle East and in Latin America. He's the one that forces Canadians to spend more on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined, while he stashes his cash in a Bermuda tax haven above a bicycle shop. So if he wants to say that he's Canada first, why doesn't he stand up in this House and start acting like it?
Yep. That's what happened yesterday in the House and why Pierre was calling for an emergency debate last night. And why are you not hearing about this in the mainstream media? Right? Why are you only hearing probably stuff about MAGA this and MAGA that and everything we don't like is MAGA? Well, just a reminder, right? Qualified Canadian Journalism Organization. Most of the media out there that's being consumed by Canadians is controlled by the Liberal government through this particular situation, which allows these media corporations to offset the expenditures of each of their persons by about almost 30 grand, a taxpayer expense. That's right, Canadians, you're paying for fake news. Yes, well, people say, oh, it's not fake news. Well, it's filtered. It's bloody filtered. I mean, look at all the stories that we had the week when Parliament was off. The media was just infatuated with the issues that were going on within the conservative government, or conservative government, I wish, conservative party. Right? There was like, oh, they're losing people, that they're all so discontent. Well, actually, what's really happening, I think, is that people are starting to leave the actual liberal government, right? So we've already had Chrystia Freeland being sent on her way, and now she's been giving a third pay raise. So she's like triple dipping now, getting some help at Rhodes as the CEO, getting some money there. So I mean, it's only a matter of time before she gives up her seat, right? I mean, when is she going to be in the country? And can she just continue to vote through an app on her phone? Clay, Wyatt Claypool had mentioned this earlier, that he had a list of people that he figured were probably going to be leaving on top of Chrystia Freeland. So let's listen to that.
We have Bill Blair, who is likely to end up leaving to take some sort of a diplomatic post, whether that's in the United States or another country. We have Ralph Goodale, a longtime Liberal veteran MP, who may take over as, I believe he's some diplomat in the UK. There's some position out there he wants. And then, of course, everyone's least favorite environment minister somehow, despite the fact that Catherine McKenna was also environment minister at one point, Stephen Guilbeault, the former environment minister, is also somebody who we are likely to see resign over the next little bit, because he has not really been given the big role he's wanted out of this new government. I think he's like Minister of Official Languages or something like that. Stephen Guilbeault doesn't really have anything else to achieve right now. He's gotten his pension that was granted to him this October, and right now he just basically is just puttering around in a government that is just not green enough for him, not radical enough, so why should he stick around? And he shouldn't stick around. And I would love for a bunch of these Liberal MPs to resign early, because I want to see Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives be able to test their mettle against the Liberals in a by-election, especially seeing where the NDP currently lies, because depending on how much of the vote the NDP is going to get in these by-elections, we can kind of determine.
Right. So then, of course, we heard the latest rumors today that Jolie will be leaving the government for a post in France. And of course, just let me on. There we go.
This caucus, they'll run cover for this party. When 8 people are on their way out because they either disagree with Carney or Carney disagrees with them, or they're making a fool of themselves, not reading contracts. And so it's like, all right, Jolie, you're done. We're sending you to Paris. That's where we are at this present time, because they know more stuff like this is coming down the pipe, and they're not ready for the truth. And this is where we'll end our show today, baby.
So Melanie Jolie never read the contract. Blacklock's put that out today, or yesterday. Never read the bloody contract with Stellantis, even though she's in the house and she's just pointing, oh, don't worry, you'll get the... She's always with the snapping in the fingers when she's talking in the question period. But yeah, she perjured herself in committee. She didn't really perjure herself, because they're slow, slippery, like the Teflon suits that they wear. But she never really directly answered the question, and that's why she wouldn't. Right? Because she didn't actually know. She was just going on briefings of her staff, but she was acting like she was the subject matter expert, when in fact she never read the contract. So there we go. $13 billion, I think, just pissed away on a contract that, again, the Liberals, it's not their money, right? So why should they care? Other people's money for them. They have no financial interest in making sure that when they do their job, that they're held accountable, because we can't. So you can't hold them accountable. They can spend with impunity without any issues whatsoever, unless they're actually caught like with a smoking gun in their hand. And even then, who knows if they'll actually go to jail for anything. But typically, right now, the way this is set up, we're not going to get any satisfaction. Now, speaking of illiberal satisfaction,
result in more revenue than expected, lower spending than forecasted, or a smaller deficit than projected. No, 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 no. Under liberal governments, the math is almost always wrong in one direction. And guess who loses every single time? Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Let's take the heat off of Mark for a second. Let's start with the cannabis legalization numbers because this one just came out and this one is almost poetic. Justin Trudeau rode cannabis legalization straight into power in 2015. It was the brightest, shiny object on his campaign shelf. He promised it would generate nearly $750 million in tax revenue in the first 5 years of cannabis legalization. They told Canadians this would be the jackpot, that the government would make so much money that drug education programs would expand, addiction awareness campaigns would be amplified, and Canada would become some sort of model of enlightening social policy around the world. And what has happened? Well, the tax revenue came in more than $100 million short of what they projected. And Health Canada's promised spending on education didn't just fall short, it evaporated. One of the only things the Liberals actually managed to implement, which was the legalization of cannabis, ended up being yet another financial miscalculation on the Liberal part. And while they shrug it off, oh well, we missed it by $100 million. Canadians pay for that. Because think about this.
Pay, 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 pay. It's all we ever do. Now, if you think, oh, hang on.
Where you can escape to the
Now, if you think you can escape and live off the grid and get away from government, well, guess what? Things are clamping down all over. Now, come across this video today. Talks about 5 Canadian provinces that are cracking down on off-grid living. And how are they able to do this? It's easy. Through regulations, through laws, through taxation. So the worst provinces that they're talking about there are, they start with Ontario, they go to British Columbia, then they go to Alberta. That's right, Alberta. Then Nova Scotia, then Quebec. And the way they do it basically is that they're mandating different things. So if you have a house, you will be forced to get connected to the grid. If there's, in some cases, you got water pipes running within 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers of your house. Oh, sorry, you're gonna have to pay to run a water line out to your area. Uh, your heating systems, it's like they have in Quebec. Everything has to be, you have to have somebody official who's certified, who's authorized to get anything done whatsoever. The days of do-it-yourself, handyman stuff, yeah, you can fix around your house, but you want to try to do anything on your own whatsoever when you're trying to add something new, woohoo, forget about it. So they will want full architectural designs and consultations. And so if you're looking at areas, you can buy yourself a nice parcel of land for 30 grand and go, wow, right on, I can afford that. But then you look and you find out that it'll cost you a minimum of $50,000 to $70,000 in regulation and licensing fees, even before you start to put anything up on the land. And a lot of this is being driven by municipalities. It's not even the provincial government in many cases. It's bit by bit. It's like what they said, things for people on the left. And I'm sure that some of these rules that have been enacted are not necessarily all people on the left of the spectrum when it comes to politics within these municipalities, but they just see it as revenue. Well, how are we going to run a municipality if we don't force them to get on there? Well, you can't be independent power. So here you have Quebec as the most green province, apparently. And if you look at their politicians, the Bloc Québécois losing their bloody minds because the Liberals want to actually maybe almost develop some resources in Canada, and then they lose their mind. But of course, the Liberals are not going to develop anything, so they're losing their minds for nothing. But it gives them the talking point of their climate cult to constantly say, "Oh, sorry, we need to save the environment." But meanwhile, people that can actually live green off the grid won't be allowed to do that. It won't be, no, because you can say, "Hey, no, look, I can have a zero carbon footprint just by doing it on my own. I don't need to be connected." And we go, oh no, 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 can't do that. We can't count you as a carbon credit unless you're connected. Simple things like having a septic system. The additional rules and regulations that they put into that, forget about it. You want a composting toilet? Forget about it. The only thing really that's saving you if you want to live off the grid right now is if your house is on wheels, because that's about it. Now, there's still some provinces left, but it's only a matter of time if they keep going down this route. Unless, of course, we are in a representative democracy. These kind of things need to be brought up with our political representatives at all three levels of government. Somebody needs to do something about it. And of course, the people that are going to do something about it are the people that are scrounging around, too busy working, trying to save enough money to buy a house that they will never be able to afford in the new land that the liberals have built for us. And so I'm going to go to number 3 here. I have enough time. If we do, let's get to the Alberta part. And number 2, number 3.
du Québec, RBQ, a provincial body with powers that would make other provincial regulators jealous. Here's what makes Quebec special. Everything requires a licensed contractor. Want to do your own electrical? How to shut these people? 2. British Columbia, Green Energy Theatre and mandatory propane from private suppliers. Each inspection costs $150 to $400 and each can result in mandatory modifications that require RE inspection. The inspection fees alone can exceed $3,000 for a simple off-grid cabin. And let's talk about Alberta's progressive renewable energy stance. The province that claims to support all energy sources has made residential solar installation a bureaucratic obstacle course. Despite simplified regulations for commercial renewable projects, residential systems still require certified installers, professional electrical design, and multiple inspections. The Electric Energy Land Use and Visual Assessment Regulation, AR 203-2024, introduced mandatory agricultural impact assessments for wind and solar, but these requirements specifically target large installations. Small residential off-grid systems slip through definitional cracks, creating legal ambiguity where inspectors have broad discretion to approve or deny installations based on subjective interpretation. The real tell is Alberta's approach to tiny homes and alternative dwellings. While not explicitly prohibiting them, Alberta Building Code definitions of dwelling effectively exclude structures under certain square footage or unconventional designs. RVs can't be permanent residences, tiny homes on wheels, not dwellings, yurts, shipping containers, or earth-sheltered homes. You'll need professional engineering, special permits, and municipal approval that often never comes. Why Alberta is cracking down? Despite conservative branding, Alberta's economy is built on large-scale resource extraction and conventional development. Off-grid living represents ideological competition, proof that people can thrive without depending on corporate infrastructure. Municipalities also protect utility revenues and construction industry profits. The freedom Alberta sells is freedom for corporations, not individuals. 5.
Pretty sad once you start to realize that when you're born in Canada, you're just a corporate share for the shareholders that are in government, and they will use and abuse you as best they can. Unless the system changes, no wonder so many people keep living in Canada. No wonder we had so many expatriates taking their wealth and leaving, even before 2015. An average about 30 grand worth of people a year leaving Canada. And that's, even if some of them didn't have much wealth, even if they only planned to retire in Canada, and said, you know what, I think my money can go a lot further somewhere else where I'm not taxed to death. And off they went. And then as soon as the liberals come in, that number doubled. No wonder they've been going crazy on immigration, trying to bring people in. Problem, no. Those people are coming in, they're not bringing in any wealth with them. In fact, they're just spending more of our wealth on them. I didn't have time to get this up, but it was something that Marty up north put up some stats lately, basically showing that a ratio of 2 to 1 of government jobs to private sector jobs in Canada right now. That means that for every one person working, there's 2 people in government. That's at all 3 levels, right? Municipal, provincial, federal. That's a bad ratio. That's a super bad ratio. You want that ratio to be inverse. In fact, you want that ratio to be inverse and much higher. Because right there, that is a signal that tells us that right now the economy is about ready to collapse. Because there's no way that for every one person working, that they're making enough money in taxes to support two public sector workers and all the money that, of course, the liberals are spending like mad dogs on meth, like drunken sailors on a party that just won't stop. I'm keeping track here of lower house. It's quarter after, and they are still doing statements by the members. Again, terribly sorry for the delay in the start today with the forced startups. Just before the show, it was kind of horrible too, because there was some extra stuff I actually wanted to broadcast before the show started. We can do that tomorrow. So here's Rebel News, and every time she is in Montreal, she gets surrounded by thugs. And look at these guys. These guys are covering their faces and acting like big men, trying to intimidate this little woman here. And of course, the cameraman is there, and their personal security is doing the best that they can. But there's only so much you can do in interference and protection. And the fact that our independent press needs protection is indicative of how far our society has fallen. And all these Antifa thugs that you see running around, never forget, Antifa has been branded a terrorist organization in the United States. So, and of course, this is the same reporter that also exposed an Antifa thug working in the Department of National Defense as a civilian in Montreal. The guy that tossed the smoke grenade in the church. And of course, I've always had questions like, oh, that's an interesting smoke grenade. Is that something that you got maybe from the store's locker in the munitions dump? And I mentioned, of course, at the time, I was very concerned that they didn't identify where that smoke bomb. It looked like military equipment. And having been a warrant officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, who's actually at one point had the munitions dump under my supervision, is one of my shops would be handling those. There's a lot of rules and regulations to be followed, and I find it very interesting that there's not much more. But then again, right? Like I said at the very beginning, as a public service announcement, um, qualified Canadian journalism organization. That's why you don't hear about that stuff because they control the news that gets out on behalf of the liberals. I believe we should be almost ready to start. Now, there's still statements by members. They have a lot to say. Oh, look at this. Brookfield Asset Management. I like this response that Mike had to Anita Anand, my least favorite person in government, as I clench my teeth. This being the single largest foreign investment commitment in Canadian history, we're unlocking generational investments to build the strongest economy in the G7. Yeah, unlocking your pension funds, people. Not our superannuation fund for those that are in the military or the RCMP, but yeah, all your other pension funds out there, the real pensions that they're toying with, that they're using as an investment, right? They're moving your money into these funds and then using that money to invest in their green scam related stuff. And they've not provided any receipts for the the $1 trillion that they've spent already in the past 10 years. We don't know what the hell they've given us other than some free stuff that's not free for everybody. And I think they are getting started. No, still statement by member. It's Leslie Lewis that's talking. So, of course, Mike here says, look what happened with the BAM, the Brookfield Asset Management, in after hours trading the minute the announcement was made. And of course, he asked, did you get in early? Right? Did you get in early? Well, we know who got in early, right? That's Mark Carney, our prime minister. He's perpetually invested in Brookfield. Oh, yeah, it's behind an ethical screen. Yeah. Yeah, so's my RSPs. They're behind an ethical screen. And as soon as I cash them in, that ethical screen takes a bunch of tax money off of it because they're sitting there ethically, right? I've ethically invested my money there, and that portfolio is going to keep making money as long as I don't cash it in, even though it's behind my little personal ethical screen. They must think we're all fools. Well, Michael Barrett, I think we have enough time to listen to your video from yesterday.
While Canadians struggle to afford groceries, rent, and the basics of life, Mark Carney's Liberal insiders are living it up. Meet Pierre Tremblay, the Liberal-appointed president of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. And despite his $343,000 yearly salary, he keeps billing massive luxury expenses to the taxpayers. He jet-setted to Vienna like he was on a European vacation. But his trip to France this year was even more expensive than that. Over $14,000 billed to you, the Canadian taxpayer, and that's before we get into how much he spent on his room and accommodations at the Hotel Castellan, which the Liberals refuse to release. But even that's not enough for him. He raised his expense budget by 85%, and the Liberals are letting him spend $185,000 per year on luxury hotels, and if you can believe this, limo rides. $640 a night for hotel rooms in France, $635 per night for a hotel in Finland. Tremblay has been taking limos
in our favor before July 21st, but there haven't been any wins. The Americans have doubled tariffs, even though that he...
Who cares, Mr. Speaker? Monsieur le Président, le Premier...
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised that he would negotiate in our favor before July 21st, but there haven't been any wins. The Americans have doubled tariffs, even though the Prime Minister has made concessions, getting rid of the digital services tax, the counter tariffs. He's even backed down on softwood lumber, but he got nothing in return, except for one thing, a contract from President Trump for Brookfield, an $80 billion contract, is getting more for his business, the win that he promised Canadians. The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows very well, Canadians did not place their trust in his judgment when it came to standing up to President Trump. They didn't trust him not to just sign any old agreement. What we've done is to work hard with the U.S. to find an agreement that will be in the interest of both industries and workers in Canada. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are taking more measures to help Canadian workers and industries.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, do you want the good news or the bad news? Well, in these times, I guess we'll have to start with the good news. It's all we've got. The good news is that David Eby, the Premier of BC, has absolutely no constitutional authority to block a pipeline. The bad news is that this Prime Minister does. Under Section 9210A of the British North American Act, works between provinces are exclusively the federal government's responsibility. So will the Prime Minister stop hiding behind the powerless Premier, get out of the way, and approve a pipeline to the Pacific today?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'd invite the member opposite to buy a ticket to Calgary tomorrow to see how a federal government works with the provincial government to build Canada strong.
Leader of the Opposition.
Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will wave around in the air a worthless piece of paper that he says that the Premier of BC can veto any time he wants. Here's the political problem he has. Canadians want a pipeline. They know it's the best way to get our resources to market going around the United States of America, but his Keep It in the Ground caucus is standing in the way. Why doesn't he stand up to them and stand up for Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Speaker, maybe the member opposite should explain to his constituents why the Premier of Alberta wants to stand beside our Prime Minister and talk about how to build Canada strong.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister claimed that he did not have the power to approve a pipeline. Well, too bad for him. The Constitution is public. 9210A says that it is exclusively a federal responsibility. He happens to be the Prime Minister. And he asked us to pass emergency legal powers in C5 to give him the personal authority to overturn any regulation in order to get the project done. In other words, this government has the exclusive power. He has the exclusive legal authority. Will he match that authority with responsibility and approve a pipeline to the Pacific today?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, what this Prime Minister is doing is leading. He's leading on building national projects. He's leading on building port capacity. He's leading on making Canadian steel, lumber, aluminum, and various commodities more available for homes, for big projects, to put people, unionized people, men and women from every part of this country to work building our great country. That's what this Prime Minister is doing. He's leading. What is the Leader of the Opposition doing, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What am I doing? I'm standing in the House of Commons.
Right. Where is he?
Where's Waldo, Mr. Speaker? He's hiding. We know he's in the House of... We know that he's in Ottawa today. We know that he's in the...
I think we're so close to the line there that we're actually stepping over it. So if the honourable opposition leader would continue, but maybe in a different vein.
Mr. Speaker, I think we're finding out that if you're not there, you don't care. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said, who cares that Canadian workers are losing their jobs because he broke his promise to get a deal? We care. Why doesn't he show up and prove he does too?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
I invite the member opposite to buy a ticket and come to Calgary tomorrow and see who cares.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, we've gone from elbows up to who cares under this Prime Minister. Remember, he said he would negotiate a win and he would get a deal by July 21st. Well, still no win, still no deal. He's made concession after concession. He backed down on counter tariffs, on the digital services tax, on the legal action against softwood lumber, and he got nothing in return. Well, one thing. Brookfield, his company, got $80 billion in contracts hand-signed by the president just 20 days after the two met. Is that what he meant when he said he would negotiate a win with Trump?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade.
Mr. Speaker, I know it's an inconvenient truth for the Leader of the Opposition that Canada right now, today, has the best deal of any trading partner of the United States. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? It's not good enough for Canadian workers, and it's not good enough for Canadian businesses. So unlike the Leader of the Opposition, who would have signed any bad deal put in front of him, the Prime Minister didn't do that. We said we would do the work to support Canadian workers and Canadian industries. We would buy Canadian, be our own best customer, and then negotiate a good deal with the United States.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in 1995, a Liberal Prime Minister tried to do a fast one in Quebec, essentially cheating, lying, hiding things. And in 2025, will another Liberal Prime Minister once again do the same thing to the provinces in Quebec? Based on a mandate, based on an election where he talked about trade, where actually he's instead looking to benefit American shareholders and himself. Excuse me. The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. I can say for all Canadians, and especially for Quebecers, that I'm not focusing on things that have happened in the past. Instead, I am concentrating on what we can do to make our immigration system strong and to attract the best talents in the world for both Quebec and Canada. Under the Canada-Quebec agreement, Quebec is the one that selects its own permanent immigrants. The honourable member for Belley-Chambly. Well, I'll have to make my question clearer, or make it clear who I'm asking the question. I will have to ask the Minister of Canadian Heritage, the former leader of Equiterre. Is he comfortable with the fact that the Prime Minister is trying to get around Canada's legislation in order to push an oil agenda to the detriment of the climate? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Mr. Speaker, my colleague's question might be more relevant if he hadn't authorized drilling on Anticosti Island, right in the middle of the St. Lawrence. If he hadn't made it so that in Quebec, 50% of the oil is Albertan, all due to the leader of the Bloc Québécois. And perhaps what he's saying would be a bit more relevant if under our budget negotiations, the Bloc Québécois had brought forward a single measure to protect the environment. They did not bring in a single proposal for the environment. That's what we got from the Bloc Québécois. The honourable member, had we brought forward an environmental measure, that would have meant that there was one in the budget. The Minister of Heritage, the former Minister of the Environment, he is a Quebecer. He was a member of the Liberal caucus under Justin Trudeau. Will he solemnly promise to Quebecers and people from BC that he promises, as an environmentalist who used to rappel up buildings in Ontario, that none of these projects will go forward in Quebec or BC without the consent of the province, of Indigenous groups, and social accessibility? Will he promise that that will never happen without that consent? The Honourable Government House Leader. The answer, Mr. Speaker, is yes. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Well, Mr. Speaker, this morning we learned in La Presse that the Liberal member for Laval-Les-Îles is denying that he was involved in the Quebec Liberal Party's leadership race, although he did have a certificate for raising funds. Does the member know that he needs to ask a question about matters that affect the federal government? I think it's pretty clear that my question is about a member that is here across the way, and I think my question is in order. My question is very clear. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that no member of the Liberal caucus has broken federal or provincial laws?
Have some respect, Garrison. Calling the speaker by his first name. You have none. Je vois pas que ça touche vraiment.
I don't think this has to do with any matter of federal government policy. This is a matter of provincial legislation. That was raised in the question, so I don't think that we can allow this question.
De Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles, une deuxième tentative.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking about federal legislation. Let's recall that the former parliamentary leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, Mauro Whiskey, said to Pablo Rodriguez that there were dubious shenanigans happening in Ottawa. I really think that this is pushing it. This is a matter of unproven rumors. This has nothing to do with the federal government's policies. I cannot allow this question. Mr. Speaker, now we see that the Liberals want to move on to a cover-up.
South Innisfil.
The Prime Minister says Canadians need to sacrifice more and accept a lower standard of living and quality of life, while he says
Who cares about critical trade talks with the U.S.? Acting more like an advance team for Brookfield and standing up for Canadians everywhere he goes. A deal for Brookfield follows while tariffs stay in place or go up. We learned this week that the Prime Minister stands to make millions in bonuses from Brookfield's success. Why does the Prime Minister have his elbows up for him and his Brookfield buddies, but says who cares about Canadian businesses and working families affected by tariffs?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Since this Prime Minister has taken office, that's exactly what he's done. In fact, we stood up for Canadian companies and workers all across this country, and just in a few minutes, the Prime Minister will do it again. He'll stand up for Canadian companies, lumber companies, steel companies, and their hard-working union members that are fighting so hard to protect the economy of their region. Mr. Speaker, why don't they get on board and fight for Canadian families instead of for themselves?
The honourable member for Berwick South Innisfil.
So he shrugs off critical trade talks with a smug who cares. Here's something he can't shrug off and everyone should care about. Despite the conflict of interest and ethics screen he has on Brookfield, we found out this week that the Prime Minister met with Brookfield executives behind closed doors in his office in October, proving that his ethics screen is more like a smoke screen. The Prime Minister and Brookfield stand to gain millions from his policies. He knows he can't have any contact with Brookfield, but he met with them anyways. Why would he meet with Brookfield knowing he's barred from having any contact with them?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Speaker, the Prime Minister in a few minutes will be doing his job. He'll be standing up for steel workers. Every project, every infrastructure project in this country depends on one thing, Mr. Speaker, Canadian steel, strong Canadian steels, and the workers who produce it, Mr. Speaker. We are strengthening our steel industry, standing by our steel workers, Mr. Speaker. We are investing in our workers. The Conservatives are investing in division.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands.
The Prime Minister has backed down on counter tariffs. He's backed down on the legal challenge against the softwood lumber tariffs, and he's saying, who cares? Now, Canadians thought that he got nothing in his negotiations. It turns out that he just got nothing for Canadians. After his last trip to the White House, he got an $80 billion nuclear deal for his company, Brookfield, which will see the Prime Minister's own personal investments increase in value. So why is it that the Prime Minister is trading our national interests for his own personal financial interests?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is standing up today for workers across Canada, for BC Wood, building affordable housing across Canada with BC Wood. He's standing up to reduce the transportation costs across the country, to get BC Wood to build homes across Canada, and to bring steel from central Canada to the east and west more affordably. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is standing up for Canadians today, and we stand with him.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
The Prime Minister's not standing up. He's backing down, like he did on counter tariffs and like he did on the legal challenge for illegal softwood lumber tariffs. But it gets worse when it comes to this Prime Minister's record on Brookfield. We learned that the Liberals gave $500 million to the European Space Agency last week. Guess who owns 50% of the agency's site where the funds are going? None other than this Prime Minister's company, Brookfield. Again, seeing his own personal profits increase at the expense of Canadians, at the expense of Canadian investment and Canadian jobs. Why won't this Prime Minister put Canadians ahead of his own financial interests for once?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we are in a trade war. While the Conservatives focus on conspiracy theory, our Prime Minister will stand up later today and make...
Not from the top, but the member may continue.
Mr. Speaker, we are in a trade war. While the members opposite engage in conspiracy theories, our Prime Minister will stand up later today and announce major new supports for the forest products industry. On top of $1.2 billion we've already announced, Mr. Speaker. That's how we stand up for Canada.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Prime Minister
minister talked a big game during the election, but has since failed to deliver on the U.S. trade deal. He's backed down on every Trump demand, from the digital services tax to counter tariffs to softwood lumber. He has delivered exactly 0 results for Canadians on the U.S. trade war. But to be fair, he is seeing some results with his Brookfield shares, with the Americans coincidentally signing an $80 billion nuclear deal with his company a mere 2 weeks after his last U.S. visit. So why is it that under this Prime Minister, his financial investments are doing so well, but Canadian workers are being left behind?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader is busy writing letters and debating himself, we're taking action to support Canadian steel and lumber industries and workers. We've got great news. This afternoon, we will introduce and announce new measures too. Further limit foreign steel imports to ensure that Canadian steel products and producers have better access to the domestic market. Become our own best customer by building big with Canadian steel and Canadian lumber. Increase protections for Canadian steel and lumber workers and businesses so they can adapt and thrive in this new global landscape. I urge the Conservative leader to tune in. Get behind these men.
The honourable member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals want a second dirty oil pipeline. Even with Trans Mountain, they still want more. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. They want to sell more dirty oil to Asia. And thanks to C5, this pipeline will be able to ignore environmental assessments. It will fill up oil tankers, which will break the law and sail right through a protected marine area. Is there a single Liberal out there with a single shred of conscience? And if so, will they get up and say that this makes absolutely no sense? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, like I did yesterday, I will speak about the projects that our government is bringing forward in order to build Canada strong. As I said yesterday, if we want to talk about Quebec, we have the project in Saint-Michel-des-Seines in Quebec. This is a project that will continue to improve energy storage and electric vehicle batteries. Like all of our projects, we will respect provincial jurisdiction, and we will respect Indigenous rights. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that these Liberals are ashamed. Every time the Liberals hear about their new dirty oil pipeline, they can't wait to change the subject. They know that it's a climate disaster. They know that it's a biodiversity disaster. And they know that there's also the chance of this turning into a financial debacle like Trans Mountain. And yet tomorrow they're going to watch their PM have a photo op with Danielle Smith to announce a pipeline that actually they can't defend at all. We know they're ashamed, but the real question is, do they realize that they are right to be ashamed? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, quite the contrary. We are extremely proud to be contributing to building this country, to building opportunities throughout Canada, like renewable energy throughout the country, like significant projects like the mine my colleague just mentioned. It is the Bloc Québécois that wants to destroy our economy. With them, and then we also have the Conservatives who simply want to open the floodgates. As usual, between the two of them, the Liberal Party is finding the correct middle ground. The Honourable Member for Montmorency Charlevoix. Well, Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has gone.
I don't know if this is the same mine they're talking about, but there was a mine that came in my radar that they've been bragging about, pushing ahead, but it has failed every single level of review before being able to be accepted so far. Like environmental, like even the most, like it's, some things have not even been approached. It's like they were just waiting for somebody to stamp it, say, no, we don't care about what you do, just make it happen. Yeah, that's so I don't think that actual mine is going to happen either.
From elbows up to who cares after he failed to sign an agreement on tariffs with the U.S. He backed down on the digital services tax, on counter tariffs, and on the legal measures on softwood lumber. We thought that he hadn't gotten a win, but the truth is that he didn't get a win for Canadians, but the Americans did sign an $80 billion nuclear agreement with the Prime Minister's business, Brookfield. And we know that when Brookfield gets richer, so does the Prime Minister. Why is this Prime Minister sacrificing the interests of Quebecers and Canadians so that he can profit? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister makes a decision, it's in the interest of all Canadians. That is why we've made several trips, although our colleagues don't like that. We've gone abroad to find new investment. That's why this afternoon there's an important announcement, and I hope our colleagues will be paying attention, because there will be announcements on softwood lumber and others to support our industries. That's what we're doing all the time. The Honourable Member for Montmorency-Charlevoix. Well, Mr. Speaker, it takes a lot of work to manage all of the conflicts of interest having to do with Brookfield. The clerk of the Privy Council told us that teams are working around the clock to manage these conflicts of interest. He sold his Brookfield shares to be sure that he meets ethical standards, but the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff has told us that every day he's speaking to the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that everything is under control. The Prime Minister is ending up making tariffs go up every time he leaves the country. He can't seem to get a win for Canadians, and he needs dozens of people to regulate his conflicts of interest. Could he at the very least sell his Brookfield shares and stop being in a conflict of interest every single day? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, every time the Prime Minister leaves the country, it's in order to sign contracts with other countries, to find new markets for our products. Canada has what the world needs, and we will find new partners. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are pretending that they don't understand that, but actually, they do. And I'm honestly saddened to see the pathetic partisan games they're playing. They understand this perfectly well, but they pretend not to.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to trade with the Americans, the Prime Minister went from elbows up to who cares? He backed down on counter tariffs and on legal challenges to softwood lumber and got nothing in return when he went to Washington in October. Well, nothing for Canadians. Days later, the Americans signed an $80 billion nuclear deal with the Prime Minister's company, Brookfield. When is this Prime Minister going to get a deal for Canadians and not just a deal for himself and his company?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Conservative cares is like an oxymoron or some pathetic joke, because we know those two terms are like oil and water. They just do not mix. Who cares is our government cares. We're the ones standing up for our industries. We're making more announcements today. The Prime Minister is stepping up with increased protections for our domestic market, with new support for our industries and workers in steel and softwood lumber, and additional commitments to buy Canadian so that we ensure that our workers and industries will thrive for generations to come.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, it is being reported that the government's MOU with Alberta includes a multi-billion-dollar investment in carbon capture with Pathways Alliance, the premier carbon capture company connected with Pathways Alliance is none other than Entropy, which is owned by none other than Brookfield. Is the reason it has taken the government so long to get a deal with Alberta because the Prime Minister has been busy getting a deal for Brookfield?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hate to break up their conspiracy theory, but Pathways is actually owned by 6 large oil companies, not Entropy.
Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, the very Brookfield fund that the Prime Minister stands to make millions of dollars in future bonus pay invested $300 million in Entropy. So, in the face of that, can the government provide the assurance that the deal negotiated by the Prime Minister will in no way benefit Entropy and, by extension, the Prime Minister's financial portfolio?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, here we go again, conspiracy theory. We're focused on building Canada. We're focused on working with Alberta to grow our natural resources in a responsible way in consultation with First Nations. That's how we build, not conspiracy theory.
For Mississauga Centre.
Mr. Speaker, young Canadians are ambitious and ready to build Canada's future. Budget 2025 makes generational investments in youth, from Canada Summer Jobs and the Student Work Experience Program to expanded training and apprenticeship opportunities. These aren't short-term fixes. They're building blocks for a lifetime of success. While the opposition talks about cuts, this government's investing in the next generation. Could my good friend and colleague, the Minister of Jobs and Families, tell us how these programs turn ambition into opportunity for youth across Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much to the member for the question. I've had the opportunity of meeting with youth from across the country about the investments that we're making in Budget 2025. $1.5 billion, Mr. Speaker, for youth skills and training, but a very specific program. I met with some members and some members of youth from that member's riding who talked about their excitement and enthusiasm about seeing the Climate Youth Corps in this budget. Mr. Speaker, youth are worried about the climate, and now they have something to look forward to, participating in a program that allows them to use their skills and get paid for them.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Once again, Canadians are finding out that this Prime Minister is all sizzle and no steak. It turns out that his big pipeline announcement won't actually build a pipeline. He's going to have a meeting to set up a plan and then sign a piece of paper that talks about maybe one day putting shovels in the ground. And now he's handing a veto power to the NDP in British Columbia, allowing them to block the whole thing. The Prime Minister is in Ottawa, and we know that he's having trouble with his own caucus on this issue. And now he's ducking the only question that Canadians have. Was yesterday the start of a real pipeline, or just the latest episode in Announce Now and Deliver Never?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'd invite that member to get a ticket to Calgary tomorrow as well, and they could see why the Premier of Alberta thinks that things have never been so good in Canada.
For Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, that wasn't their answer yesterday. In fact, that isn't what the government said at all when they gave BC the veto in this House. Maybe they need to brush up on the Constitution, because Section 92 explicitly gives them the power to build pipelines, whether David Eby likes it or not. He also got the legal authority from this House when they asked us to pass Bill C-5 to circumvent their own regulations. And the only thing holding them back now is the same gutless paralysis that kept our oil buried and Canadians with less money over the last 10 years. So instead of hiding behind the premiers, will he get up and announce that he's going to build a pipeline?
Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, they seem determined not to want to see any development in this country. What we understand is it's federal government jurisdiction to approve a pipeline. We also understand that if a proponent wants to take it to the Major Projects Office, we expect them to work in conjunction with the affected jurisdiction and to consult First Nations. The Premier of Alberta understands that. Unfortunately, the members of the opposition don't.
No, member for Calgary East.
The Prime Minister is all set to stage a fake pipeline photo op. What he'll probably do is hand the veto power to kill that pipeline to the BC Premier so he doesn't have to do it himself. Section 9210 of the Constitution says the federal government has the sole power to approve interprovincial projects and get shovels in the ground. The only person blocking the pipeline today is this Prime Minister. Will he stand up today and commit to repealing the tanker ban, axing the industrial carbon tax, and actually getting this oil pipeline built?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Pipelines have they built? Zero.
Mr. Speaker, we learned in the course of the last election campaign that the Leader of the Opposition had in fact never spoken to the Conservative Premier of Ontario, Mr. Ford. Now, I know the Leader of the Opposition to be someone who will look back, maybe look back too often, but he looks very backwards. He'll want to learn from that mistake, and I really suggest he not make that mistake again with the Premier of Alberta. Mr. Leader of the Opposition, please call Danielle Smith.
The The honourable member for Calgary East.
With the amount of hot air coming out of that member's mouth, I'm surprised the Liberals haven't slapped a carbon tax on it. That answer was as fake as this Prime Minister's promises. Tomorrow, he'll make this grand show and pretend that he wants to get a pipeline built, but he'll hide behind someone else and get them to cancel it so he doesn't have to do it himself. The only person that can get this pipeline approved is this Prime Minister. Does the pipeline need to be sponsored by Brookfield so it actually gets built?
Unfortunately, that plane's going to get pretty full. I invite the member across to buy a ticket and come to Calgary and see what a federal government, how they can work with the provincial government to build Canada strong.
The honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
This Prime Minister promised to build Canada strong, and yet when it comes to a pipeline to BC's coast, a pipeline that could end the U.S. monopoly on Canadian oil and bring billions of dollars into Canada, he transforms into a helpless bystander, hiding behind the NDP Premier in BC, ceding responsibility, abdicating leadership. The Constitution is clear. National pipelines are the sole jurisdiction of the federal government, and failing to act is a betrayal of our national interests. It's a betrayal of our workers, and it's selling out to the Americans. Will they build the pipeline, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
Mr. Speaker, listen, today's good news for the many companies around the country who are working so hard to stay in business in the middle of this trade war. Whether it's steel, whether it's lumber, Mr. Speaker, we have their backs. And today we're going to talk more about what else we can do, not only to make sure that we protect these companies, but to help them grow their footprint, to sell their product to Canada and around the world. These guys cannot get their head out of the sand, literally, Mr. Speaker, for the sake of the companies right now who need our support. We'll do that work.
Honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
You know, Mr. Speaker, maybe if Brookfield proposed a pipeline, we could actually get one backed by this Prime Minister. Let's be clear. A majority of Canadians support this pipeline. A majority of British Columbians support this pipeline. And as long as the world needs these resources, as long as the world needs oil and gas, until that last barrel comes out of the ground, as much of those resources as possible should come from right here in Canada. Why won't this government take up its mantle of leadership, deliver on what it promised, and get this pipeline built?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, news flash, we're in a trade war. We're in a trade war, and we don't get to choose the attitude and the response of other countries. We get to choose what we do in response to protect our industries here in Canada. Tariff-impacted industries know across Canada that this government is standing up to protect their interests at every step along the way. Whether the PM is overseas securing new investments to open up other markets, or whether he's offering new liquidity support and a package to help their businesses get through challenging times, we're steadfast in supporting Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna.
Mr. Speaker, on a pipeline to the Pacific, the Prime Minister finds himself in a dilemma of his own making. He, his ministers, his MPs say one thing in British Columbia and another in Alberta, and now he's perched squarely on the fence. Under Section 9210 of the Constitution, the decision is his government's alone. So will he side with the national interest to build a new pipeline, or will he bow to President Trump and keep a supplicant to American interests instead of diversifying our energy exports?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, maybe we should come at this another way. That member is a British Columbia member. Is he really suggesting, even given the constituents he represents from First Nations, is he really suggesting that the Government of Canada, without the consent of the province of British Columbia, without consultation with First Nations, is in a position to do that? I think he doesn't really mean that. I think he hasn't thought this through, and I think that member, once he does, will come back here and agree that the Government of Canada is pursuing the right path.
Member
for Okanagan Lake West, South
The arrogance of that answer, Mr. Speaker. He hasn't spoken to my constituents like I have on this issue. And right now, the only thing that is crossing provincial borders is this Prime Minister's indecision. A pizza shop is more productive than this Prime Minister because at least they know what business they're in and they know they need to deliver in a competitive marketplace. Section 9210 is clear. The power to act is his. So will the Prime Minister stop hiding behind premiers and process, or will he finally stand up for Canada, repeal the shipping ban, axe the industrial carbon tax, and build a new pipeline to the Pacific that is in the national interest?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade.
Speaker, we want to thank our colleague in the Conservative Party for that manufactured indignation. And Mr. Speaker, we want to remind him and his colleagues in the Conservative Party that our government made a commitment to Canadians in the last election. It was an election campaign that perhaps they'd prefer to forget. We made a commitment to build the Canadian economy the right way, to build major projects again in a way that respects environmental commitments, our obligations to Indigenous peoples, and working with provinces and territories. They don't like it, Mr. Speaker. We like it, and we're proud to continue to do it.
Hear, hear. Honourable member for Calgary Signal Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has stated that he wants to make Canada an energy superpower. Well, good news. This Prime Minister has the power to approve
I could see that coming. I could see that coming. In the business, it's called an applause line, but the member may start from the top. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has stated that he wants to make Canada an energy superpower. Well, good news. This Prime Minister has the power to approve a pipeline to the BC coast. Section 9210 of our Constitution gives the Prime Minister jurisdiction over interprovincial projects like pipelines, not premiers, the Prime Minister. So will he stop passing the buck and approve an oil pipeline to the coast so that we can get this nation-building pipeline built?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister so far has referred $117 billion, $117 billion of projects to the MPO. Maybe this member can join us tomorrow in Calgary and see how this government, with the provinces, is building Canada strong.
Honourable member for Pickering-Brooklyn.
Mr. Speaker, this week, as we begin the 60 days of activism against gender-based violence, and with today marking Economic Abuse Awareness Day, we are reminded of the countless women, children, and families whose lives have been forever changed by abuse. And we are reminded that this violence doesn't always leave visible scars. It's often hidden behind closed doors, taking the form of control, isolation, and economic abuse that can trap someone in a dangerous situation. Could the Minister of Women and Gender Equality speak to how our government is working to recognize and combat economic abuse and support those who are living through this painful and often invisible form of violence?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
I thank my honourable colleague for that question. As we mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we recognize the women who built this movement and the work that lies ahead. Our Economic Abuse Awareness Day, we recognize that gender-based violence can be physical, emotional, and psychological. That's why in our budget, we committed to working with financial institutions on a code of conduct to prevent economic abuse, helping them identify it and intervene safely. We will keep working together to end gender-based violence so women can live safely and free from fear. It's unfortunate the members opposite voted against this very measure.
The Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister was asked this weekend whether he had spoken to Trump about trade, he said, "Who cares?" Apparently, there is not a burning issue. Well, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives care, and so do the thousands of Oshawa auto workers at the GM assembly plant who are losing their jobs because of the trade war. How can the Prime Minister look Oshawa auto workers in the eye and tell them he doesn't care and that their jobs don't matter?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, great news for the Conservatives. We care. This afternoon, we're going to announce new measures. Further limit foreign steel imports to ensure that Canadian steel products have better access to the domestic market. Become our own best customer by building big with Canadian steel and Canadian lumber. Increase protections for Canadian steel and lumber workers and businesses so they can adapt and thrive in this new global landscape. Mr. Speaker, that leader only cares about himself, squashing a caucus revolt, and thank you.
I mean, we have unfettered freedom of speech in this chamber. I recognize that, but I think both sides have to refrain from provocation. I think that can lead to disorder, which is unparliamentary. But the honourable member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that instead of negotiating deals for Canadian auto workers, what they care about, and this Prime Minister cares about, is being more interested in negotiating deals for Brookfield.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oshawa is set to lose thousands of jobs this January, even though this Prime Minister promised to negotiate a win. This is a burning issue for Oshawa auto workers. So why isn't it a burning issue for this Prime Minister?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that I just recently met with the Unifor Union 222, that's the local chapter at the GM Oshawa plant, and they're happy with what our government is doing to support them. They've said that no deal is better than a bad deal. They've acknowledged our remissions framework and how we've adjusted it, and they are looking to us for leadership and more support. That's exactly what the Prime Minister is announcing later today for tariff-impacted industries. Our government stands steadfast and strong in support of our workers all across Canada. We won't stand down, and we won't take any lessons from the
honourable member for Niagara Falls, Niagara on the Lake.
Speaker, after 8 months, this Prime Minister has gone from elbows up to who cares when it comes to trade issues with the United States. These comments spark concern in my community, particularly with the thousands of current and former GM workers in St. Catharines who worry about the future of their auto plant. GM has been in St. Catharines since 1929. I can tell you Conservatives care, Canadians care, the workers at these plants who depend on these jobs care. What's it going to take? Does Brookfield have to buy General Motors for this Liberal Prime Minister to finally care?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we were elected on a plan to build big, Mr. Speaker, and I've met with auto workers from across the country, Mr. Speaker, and they know that we have their backs, Mr. Speaker. In a few minutes, the Prime Minister will be announcing more supports for the auto sector, more supports for the steel industry, because we have their backs. But you know what? More than that, Mr. Speaker, we're building big. We're going to build projects in national interest, homes that skilled workers will use to build across this country, Mr. Speaker. Will the Conservatives get on board?
The honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, in 2011, the Harper Conservative government created the conditions for Driver Inc., an illegal scheme where trucking companies misclassify drivers as independent contractors to avoid paying payroll taxes. This has hurt workers, distorted competition in the market, and deprived the federal government of important revenue that it should be able to use to invest in Canadians. In Budget 2025, our new Liberal government took action to end this scheme. Can the Secretary of State for the CRA please inform the House of the measures our government has taken to end Driver Inc.?
Good. The Secretary of State for the CRA.
Mr. Speaker, in this historic budget, we are investing new resources to restore fairness to Canada's trucking industry after that party, the Conservatives, broke it. We will lift the moratorium on penalties for unreported fees for service, launch a dedicated compliance program, and expand information sharing with employment and social development.
So it took 10 years for the Liberals to recognize that Driver Inc. was broken? 10 years? What happened in the interim? Could it be that you let a whole bunch of people in the country that didn't know how to drive and they got hired into that company? I don't know. Don't know anything about it. Could be. Just saying.
These measures will end the illegal Drivers Inc. scheme and level the playing field for companies that follow the law. The Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois both voted against Budget 2025. It's a shame that they didn't support tax fairness.
The Honourable Député.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent, Akiawenrak. Mr. Speaker, we know the Prime Minister is very familiar with Brookfield, but does he know about PACCAR? It's a business which has been making trucks for decades. Now, they've announced 300 layoffs. So those are people, even parents, losing their jobs. Why? Because of American tariffs. Now, I know that it's not Brookfield at stake, but can the Prime Minister go talk to the workers at PACCAR and tell them who cares? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised by the colleague's question. Yes, we are currently in a trade war, which, yes, was triggered by... Is everyone surprised? But, Mr. Speaker, it's very important to remain level-headed. We can't just sign whatever deal with the United States. As for PACCAR, Mr. Speaker, we're in communication with the business. We have solutions, and we'll work on solutions with the Government of Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A brief reminder.
For Vancouver, Kingsway.
To address the chair.
Mr. Speaker, before he was elected, the Prime Minister claimed to care about the climate crisis and protecting our lands and waters. BC Liberal MPs all said they supported the tanker ban in northern BC. Now we see them stealing pages from the Conservative playbook. Without consulting the Premier of British Columbia or First Nations, Liberals are reversing 50 years of protection for sensitive coastal waters, overriding the law and risking billions of dollars of economic activity. Why are Liberals sacrificing the BC coast and betraying the voters who sent them here?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, our Prime Minister was very clear yesterday, and I think it's important to highlight that we will make sure, with any of the major projects that move forward, that we work with affected jurisdictions. That means all of the provinces, and we will work with Indigenous rights holders, respecting their positions and their rights. We will make sure that we continue to build Canada as a strong country, strong future for our country, and we will make sure that we do it well.
Hear, hear.
This concludes question period for today. Yes, it is. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, you prevented me from asking a question regarding the operations of the government. If you will now allow me, I will ask the question. It wasn't involving the operations of the government. It involved a provincial legislature. It, in all semblance, had nothing to do with the politics of this federal government. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, twice today, you have prevented a member from... Mr. Speaker, during QP, if I may finish, I won't be long. Twice now, you have prevented a member from finishing their question. A question that did have relevance to the government. I am sorry. That is true, that it happens from time to time. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé is rising on a point of order. Yes. First, Mr. Speaker, if I may, on the same point of order. With all due respect, We have the right to ask questions about what is in the media, TVA, Radio-Canada. We have the right to ask questions about current affairs in the House. In my view, the question did not concern federal government policies or programs, nor did it concern the federal cabinet. That is why I did not allow the question. Does the member have a further point of order? Yes, on a different point of order, Mr. Speaker. If you ask, you will find there is unanimous consent for the following motion. That for the duration of the tribute for the member for Bécancour, Nicolet Sorel, that member be sat in the seat belonging to the member for Mirabel. All agreed? I believe we have unanimous consent. As such, the member can change his seat.
Can you go Wood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if you can clarify the rules around a question, 30-second in duration, that begins with a preamble that may seem to be unrelated to government business, but that concludes on a matter that is related to government business. In the past, members have been able to finish.
Allow a bit of a preamble, but in this case, I don't think that the second part of the question respected the rules. So I ruled it out of order. I'm sorry.
I listened long enough to discern the conclusion of the question. Now, as it is 3:12 p.m., pursuant to the order adopted on November 24th, 2025, the House will now proceed to tributes for the member for Bécancour, Nicolet Sorel Alnavac, the honourable member for Beloy Chambly.
Well, let me get the right screen up here. That's not the right screen. There we go. Much better. Turn that off. Okay. So it's strange. I'm listening to all these points of order, and the speaker, when he's ruling, obviously, he gets the last word regardless. But I don't think this is the end of it. Now, notice when he said, well, the question had nothing to do with government business. That's why I wouldn't allow it. Well, that's weird because for some reason, this week and last week, he's been allowing the government to ask questions of the opposition during question period that have nothing to do with government business. So I don't think these points of order are done. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. Again, if you were here near the beginning, I profusely apologize for the late start. I was having issues with the computer. It's all of a sudden the sound died, then a restart, and then there was no internet, and then a restart. By the time I got going, we were 10 minutes late. And we were a bit of a rush. So the stuff we didn't get to see today, we will see tomorrow if you guys all come and join us. Thank you so much for joining in. I can see that I've got a rather large group already logged in. And thank you for those putting your comments in the chat. Just read this here by Scotty at the top. Buy Canadian. Wow, that slogan. It should make Canada the richest country in the world. And what a joke. And laugh that liberals think this will save our economy, stopping pipelines. Indeed. I fully agree with you, Scotty. And there's a bunch of other comments there by Lar. I just let you know that I do not approve any calls for violence. I spent 38 years in a position whereby the government were able to use us to bring forth violence to accomplish a political means, which is the entire purpose of the military. There's a place for violence, and that is not within our society in Canada. That's why we have 3 levels of government to attach ourselves to get things done within our society. All right, let us go to the outro, and just to let you know, there will be a new episode starting on the weekend. Again, I haven't decided whether or not it's going to be a separate channel. Probably will be. On Rumble, it's a little different because you can have separate channels all on the same account. But in YouTube, obviously, you have to have separate channels and separate accounts. And there has been a bunch of separate intros that I did for this. There's going to be 2 episodes Saturday because I didn't get around to the first one last weekend, and it's just one of these things where I'm just so excited about the show. There's probably going to be episode 1 followed by episode 2, and they will be live streamed. So just give you a quick taste of what the intros are like. Let's fade into that. or not? Hello?
I am programmed to destroy those life forms which are imperfect. Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Always do that. I always forget to put the mic on. Okay, thanks a lot for coming out. We'll see you tomorrow. Like, share, subscribe.
Does it take to get a pipeline approved by this Prime Minister? Does it have to be a Brookfield pipeline?
Of economic slowdown in Canada. He should stand in his place right now and apologize for those comments. Take those members to task and do something for.
If the Conservatives want the truth, we'll tell them the truth.
Yesterday from the Prime Minister really freaked these Conservatives out because they saw the ambition in that speech. And not only did they see it in that speech today, as the Prime Minister stood with the Premier investing in new nuclear to ensure the jobs of today and the future, they know that the youth...
The only thing that's revolting are those answers.
Speaker, we will take no lessons from these Conservatives. Trust me on that, Mr.
It's too bad that minister didn't write the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, because it wouldn't have bored and depressed to tears all of those poor students stuck in that room. There he spoke about how they would have to sacrifice more and that it would take time to reverse all of the misery that has built up over the last 10 years. Mr. Speaker, young people want to have homes. They want to have jobs. They want to have hope. They want a budget that is affordable so they can have a life that is affordable. Will the Prime Minister introduce that budget so that Canadians can restore the promise of their country?
And we decide what comes next.
Canada know that this government has their back. There's going to be a powerful statement for the young people of Canada.
Driving inflation. The more Liberals spend, the more it costs Canadians at the grocery store. 25% of Canadians are using food banks because they can't afford to eat. So when will the Prime Minister finally get his inflationary deficits under control so Canadians can put food on the table?
Mr. Speaker, Conservative members pretend to care about food insecurity, but then they call feeding children garbage.
Mr. Speaker, what's garbage was that answer?
Did the Prime Minister see the ad before it went out?
Of course there are too many people living in poverty in Canada, but there are significant initiatives being put in place by this government.
Being serious means being honest and telling
Canada's economy is in fact growing, Mr. Speaker.
I can't imagine what we have in store for Wednesday.
We are able to proceed. The Leader of the Opposition, now that he's standing right there, may want to stand up and say what part of that process would he not respect, Mr. Speaker. Understudy, and we are building the country at unimaginable speed. We are creating opportunities for energy workers, for young people, for housing, for steel, lumber, aluminum, and autos in this country. That is what we are doing. What is shocking is that the Leader of the Opposition stands in his place and somehow pretends in his whole fake way that he's going to override and steamroll the rights of Canadians that have a right to have a say in these projects. We're going to give them a say. He won't.
While the Prime Minister hides under his desk, he puts up his House Leader to rant and rave and pump his fists in the air. So when he finally stand up for workers, stand up in this House and answer the question, a pipeline or a pipe dream?
The member for Calgary Midnapore suggested the Prime Minister was disloyal to Canada. Secondly, the member for Northern Rockies repeated MAGA claims that immigrants were the cause of economic slowdown in Canada. He should stand in his place right now and apologize for those comments. Take those members to